Good evening and welcome to our weekly book study. We are just starting Christian Anarchism by Alexander Christianopoulos. It is an outreach from New Covenant House, and the reason why we're doing it is that we wanted to not only help spread the gospel. We also wanted to invite you to consider living in intentional community. New Covenant House is in development. We are still working on the concept. And if you want to, you can definitely be involved in that. You don't have to even consider moving in here. You can simply contact us and we'll let you know how we are progressing, and if you have input, we will welcome that as much. So feel free to contact us either way. If you are here now, you are not missing much. We just started our new study on Christian Anarchism. This is, I think, the second or third installment of this. The first week we pretty much just talked a little bit about what to expect. We're studying chapter 1 in Andrew Christianopoulos' book. Chapter 1 is titled The Sermon on the Mount, a Manifesto for Christian Anarchism. So the idea is that if you read Matthew 5-7 and Luke 6, then you pretty much know everything there is to know about Christianity. That may be a little bit too much, but it's pretty close to the truth. So the Sermon on the Mount is absolutely central to anarchist understanding of the gospel. And to one writer, thinker, Leo Tolstoy, this verse that we're going to be talking about tonight is absolutely central within the Sermon on the Mount. The one that says, we'll just read the passage that surrounds that one, because tonight we're going to be talking about resist no evil. So it's in Matthew 5 verses 38-42. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And that is the actual verse that Tolstoy is hanging everything on. And if any man will sue thee at the law and take away thy coat, let him have your cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that will borrow of thee, turn not thou away. The reason why we are reading from this old King James Version is that is the version that Tolstoy used for his analysis of this passage. So the Sermon on the Mount really has, in anarchist interpretation, is dramatically different from traditional interpretation. So there may be some may even say that some interpreters have deliberately misleading you, and others will be doing it by mistake, honest mistake. But Tolstoy himself says he's in the strange position of having to search for meaning of Jesus' teaching as for something new. So he goes so far as to simply disregard all other interpretations. The Sermon on the Mount is in 8 parts, and we're going to be starting with number 1. The first, he says here on page 31, the first and biggest section of this chapter reviews in detail the various clusters of interpretation made by Christian anarchists and selected pacifists on this passage in order to draw out this anarchist implication. So that's where we're starting today, with the command not to resist evil. And that part in turn is in, I believe, six parts. And this is just, we're going to be staying in the first part of it for several weeks. And Jesus begins with, ye have heard there hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. So in other words, in Old Testament times, the command was to retaliate in kind. You would think that that would be fine, but the reason why God even commanded this is that people tended to retaliate more than the harm that was done to them. So, in other words, if you knock out one of my teeth, I would then go and knock out 2 of yours. And that's not justice. Justice in those days was 1 tooth for 1 tooth. But that's not good enough for Jesus. Because people then would say it is okay to knock out teeth, as long as you do it as retaliation for another doing it to you. So he says, but I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. So Jesus comes up with 3 illustrations of this command not to resist evil. And the first one is, and again, we are being introduced to some interpreters who, the idea of this book is to draw them out, to create a synthesis that will illustrate what Christian anarchism really is. So everything is collected in one place, instead of all these authors and thinkers writing individually. Through Alexander and Christianopoulos, they are now writing together. Everything will be collected in here as far as he knows. So in the first illustration, which is to turn the other cheek, is, and I'm just going to read it because it says it so much better than I ever could. So, and this is an interpretation that I've seen other people come up with, that they're asking why it's the right cheek and not the left cheek. So here it says, in those times the left hand was used only for unclean hands, which means the attacker must have used the right hand. But in that case, the only way one could strike the right cheek with the right hand would be with the back of the hand. And I think a lot of pastors say it's something to that effect as well. That's not unique for an anarchist, I don't think. Actually, we could actually dive into some of these other commentaries that say something different, but that would have to be a wish that you could communicate to me, and we will try to do it. You can do anything you want, really. There's no reason that I should decide what's going on in this study. If there's something you want to know, then absolutely let me know, and we'll try to figure out a way to do just that. So, in that context, he suggests this would be unmistakably an insult, a humiliation. So, that is what a lot of people are talking about. But what they don't say is that you do this because it's unexpected. You do, and we'll see that sometimes also in martial art. If somebody comes at you, you don't resist. You follow the attack and goes backwards. That will totally surprise the attacker. And in some ways, and that's the text here says that it will effectively disarm them. Okay, so Jesus' surprise response in this first illustration disempowers the attacker and forces him to regard the victim in a different light. So yeah, the unexpected. And the second illustration is, if any man will sue thee at the law and take away thy coat, let him have your cloak also. So, and these interpreters, their names are Elliot and Wink. I'm not familiar with them, but they are writing about this. Bring a similar perspective to the other two responses illustrated by Jesus. In the second one, which is this one with about the coat, they note that the pointedly handing over his cloak in response to being sued for his coat, the victim would end up naked. Yet Eliot argues that nakedness in that context would be offensive, and that the community would blame the person who brought this about more than the actual victim. So I'm not sure if you see a naked guy, then I think most people will react with, what is this fellow, what's wrong with him? So, and that we do that a lot in our society. We blame the victim, especially when we don't know the victim's background. Okay, so he goes on. Along the same lines, Wink contends that this nakedness would register as stunning protest against the social and legal system that brought this about, that the entire system would thus be publicly unmasked, but that this unmasking offers the creditor a chance to see, perhaps for the first time in his life, what his practice causes and to repent. Personally, I'm not sure that I agree with that. I think most people who sue you for your coat would be callous enough to not care about your nakedness, really. But I do not know. So again, Jesus' recommendation in this illustration would be a practical, strategic measure for empowering the oppressed against, in this case, such unfair use of the legal system. So you could say maybe that by taking this action to give him the cloak as well would be a surprise, and it will expose the attacker as unjust. Yeah, maybe so. And the third illustration, which is the one that says, and whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. And again, this passage here explains that soldiers had the right to demand from people to carry their gear for a mile. So when Jesus says that instead of just carrying it 1 mile, you would carry it 2 miles, that will in a way put you above this soldier, this representative of the military, of the oppressor, that you have the freedom to decide how far you're going to carry his stuff. That's what it says. Doing twice as much as what is usually allowed, Eliot argues, is a way of subverting authority, in that the victim is claiming the power to determine for himself the length to which he is prepared to go. So that is the freedom you have, is to decide how far you're going to go. You can't go less than a mile, but you can go 2 miles. So that's what he says. Now, I don't necessarily see that any of these interpretations are all that much different from other interpretations that I have seen so far, but I could be wrong about that. And it would be interesting if anybody could actually come up with some that are dramatically different. We should definitely look at them. So, and then this section about the 3 responses, illustrations, ends with this paragraph here. Eliot further argues that the 3 illustrations cover the 3 strategies which the enemy is most likely to employ against followers of Jesus. Physical intimidation. That's the one about humiliating by striking him in the face. Manipulation of the legal system, suing for his coat. And the military co-option, which is the soldier demanding that he carries his stuff for a mile. Jesus' examples have immediate political significance that illustrate 3 typical kinds of violence within the political context and 3 unexpected, subversive yet non-violent responses to it. And so I think the difference between this interpretation and so many others is that it's a political act. And I have seen other people writing about the politics of Jesus. One of them is John Howard Yoder. I read the book. It's not an easy read, but it's there, and it explains how all of Jesus' actions are actually political. And the other writer is Shane Claiborne. I think the book has the same exact title. So that was just a little bit of the beginning of the Resist No Evil part of the Sermon on the Mount. And there's much more to it than that. Next week, we are going to be looking at a purposeful reaction. So in other words, there are, I believe, 6 subsections in there are 6 subsections in this little paragraph here, and this was just the first one. And I hope you'll be able to make it back next week, Wednesday at 7 o'clock. We'll be here. And hopefully we can get a discussion going. That would be really cool. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.